What if events went differently at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home? What if Tom Holland's Spider-Man, out of anger, murdered Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man? Welcome back, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, to another dark what if episode that begins on a somber note. Imagine a scenario where we actually see Tom Holland's Spider-Man overpower Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and kills him with the glider by accident. Complete accident. Imagine if that actually happened within the movie. I think fans would have probably walked out. But that is the great thing with what ifs and this channel, because we go into that. We go into the rabbit hole of what could have been. And so that being said, if you guys love those types of videos and you're new here, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you're all up to date when we post. But that being said, let's go and dive into the brand new video. The night was cold. The wreckage of the Statue of Liberty, half destroyed and hanging by scaffolding, stood like a dying monument beneath the swirling storm. Purple cracks in the sky flickered like lightning, the boundaries between worlds breaking apart. And in the center of it all, Peter I stood over Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. His mask was gone. His face was drenched in sweat, blood, and raw fury. This man, this monster, had taken everything from him. Aunt May was dead. He had tried to do the right thing, to cure him, to help him, but it didn't matter. Norman had laughed, sneered, and killed her anyway. And now, Peter I had a choice. In his hands, he held the glider. The same glider that had impaled Norman Osborn in another life. This was it, the moment. His heart pounded, his arms tensed. "Finish it," Norman whispered, his smile still twisted, his eyes filled with amusement. He wanted this. He wanted to prove that Peter was no different. Peter I didn't care. He raised the glider above his head, and then a hand caught it. Peter II, the older Spider-Man, battle-worn but wise, looked at him with pain in his eyes. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His expression said it all. "You're better than this." For a brief moment, Peter I hesitated. His arms trembled. His breath was ragged. Then the anger won. With a sudden burst of force, Peter I wrenched the glider free and drove it into Peter II's chest. The world stopped. Peter II's eyes went wide. A choked gasp escaped his lips as he stumbled backward. The glider's blades were buried deep in his torso. Peter I froze. His grip loosened. His brain refused to accept what had just happened. Peter II collapsed onto the scaffolding. His body twitched. Blood pooled beneath him. Peter III, Andrew Garfield, screamed, "No!" Peter I fell backward, his hands shaking violently. He didn't mean to. He didn't mean to. The sound of his own heartbeat drowned out the chaos around him. He staggered forward, reaching toward Peter II's body, his voice hoarse and broken. I'm sorry." Peter II's breathing was shallow. His lips trembled as he tried to speak. He looked up at Peter I, not with anger, not even with disappointment, just sadness. Then his body went still. Peter II, the original Spider-Man, was dead. The moment Peter III saw Peter II die, he lost it. He rushed toward Peter I, grabbing him by the suit. "What did you do?" Peter I couldn't answer. His hands were covered in blood. His vision blurred. He had killed him. Before Peter III could say anything else, the Green Goblin's blade plunged into his back. Peter III stiffened, his body going rigid as Norman twisted the knife deeper. Peter I's eyes snapped upward. He barely had time to react as Peter III's body collapsed beside Peter II's. Norman straightened himself, blood dripping from the knife in his hand. His grin stretched wide, eyes gleaming with sick delight. "Oh, Peter," he purred, stepping over the bodies. "You made this so much fun." Peter 1 felt nothing. His grief, his horror, his guilt, it all burned away. All that was left was rage. He launched himself at Norman. The fight that followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Peter 1 wasn't holding back anymore. There were no witty comebacks, no strategic dodges. Just pure, unfiltered brutality. He grabbed Norman by the throat and slammed him into the scaffolding, the metal bending under the force. He threw punch after punch, his fists breaking bone, tearing flesh. Norman laughed, even as Peter 1 broke his ribs. He laughed, even as Peter 1 shattered his teeth. But when Peter 1 finally grabbed the glider again, lifting it high above Norman's broken body, Norman stopped laughing. The moment the glider came down, Norman Osborn was no more. Doctor Strange was too late. As Peter 1 stood over Norman's lifeless body, the world around him began to collapse. The fabric of reality ripped apart. The anchor beams that held Peter 2 and Peter 3's universes in place had been severed. Their deaths meant their worlds no longer had stability. Massive purple cracks in the sky widened, spreading across the entire planet. Strange's hands were shaking as he cast spell after spell, but it was useless. "The timeline is collapsing," he muttered, sweat dripping down his forehead. Peter 1 barely heard him. He was still staring at his hands. Norman was dead. Peter 2 was dead. Peter 3 was dead. And now, so was his world. The sky shattered. Buildings disintegrated. The ocean vanished. Cities collapsed into voids of nothingness. Doctor Strange turned to Peter 1, desperate. "I can't fix this. We have to leave. Now." Peter 1 didn't move. His world was dying. Everyone he loved was gone. He had nothing left. And so as the last remaining fragments of Earth 616 vanished into the abyss, Peter 1 just stood there, watching, crying, alone. Then, darkness. The world was dying. The sky above New York City was no longer a sky. It was a shattered mosaic of collapsing realities, a swirling vortex of colors and darkness, each fragment showing glimpses of doomed worlds falling into oblivion. Some showed familiar places, a burning Oscorp tower, a ruined Midtown High, the skeletal remains of Avengers Tower. Others showed things too broken, too alien, too wrong. Buildings crumbled into the abyss. Streets curled like paper caught in a fire. People ran in every direction, screaming, but there was nowhere left to run. The ground itself was breaking apart, floating chunks of asphalt and steel, suspended in the gravity of a collapsing universe. And at the center of it all stood Peter 1. He wasn't moving. His suit was torn, his mask discarded, his hands still covered in the blood of Peter 2. His chest rose and fell in uneven breaths, but he felt nothing. Not fear, not anger, not even sadness, just emptiness. His entire world was ending around him, and he had no strength left to care. Doctor Strange hovered above the city, his crimson cloak of levitation whipping violently in the unnatural wind. His hands blurred as he wove intricate sigils, each spell more desperate than the last. But nothing was working. The incursion had already begun. The multiversal anchor that held Peter 2 and Peter 3's universes together had been severed. With their deaths, their worlds were collapsing, and the shockwave had reached Earth 616. Strange clenched his teeth. His mind raced through every possible counterspell, every forbidden technique, every relic in the sanctum that could... No, there was no fixing this. This was not just a collapse. This was extinction. He turned his gaze downward and spotted Peter 1 standing motionless in the ruins of the Statue of Liberty, staring into nothingness. Strange descended rapidly, landing beside him, the wind howling around them.
Peter, his voice was strained, nearly drowned out by the chaos. We have to go. Now. Peter 1 didn't respond. Strange stepped closer, his patience fraying. Peter, listen to me. This universe is collapsing. If we don't leave now, you'll die with it. Still, nothing. Strange grabbed Peter by the shoulders, shaking him. Damn it, look at me. Peter 1's bloodshot eyes slowly lifted to meet his. Strange's expression faltered. He had seen broken men before, but this was something else. Peter was already gone. From the cracks in the sky, something emerged. Strange felt it before he saw it, a presence, vast and unstoppable. The overwhelming sensation of time itself being rewritten, undone, twisted into something unnatural. Then, the first wave of intruders came through. Not heroes, villains. From across the shattered multiverse, they came in droves. A version of Rhino, larger and more monstrous than any seen before, charged through the debris of the city, letting out a guttural roar. From another portal, a grotesque, mutated version of Sandman, his body composed of blackened ash, loomed over the ruins of Manhattan. A venomous Green Goblin, his armor twisted and covered in organic tendrils, descended from above, his laughter a distorted screech. They weren't alone. More came. 1,000 versions of enemies Spider-Man had fought before, now converging on the last remains of this doomed reality. Peter 1 barely reacted as his worst nightmares flooded into his world. Strange's hands trembled as he realized the truth. This wasn't just Earth, 616 collapsing. This was a multiversal invasion. Across the city, Earth's mightiest heroes made their final stand. Thor landed in Times Square, his armor in ruins, his left arm covered in frost from a reality where he had fallen to Laufey. Lightning crackled in the sky as he swung Stormbreaker one last time. Wong led the remaining sorcerers of Kamartaj, their spells illuminating the darkness as they tried to hold back the tide of invaders. Moon Knight, bloodied and battered, fought through variants of himself, each wearing the mask of Khonshu, each as lost as he was. Shang-Chi's 10 rings glowed with desperate energy, but there were too many enemies, too many fates colliding. They all fought, they all fell. One by one, the Avengers were consumed by the multiverse, until only Peter remained. Peter 1 stood alone. The city had collapsed into the void. Its once great skyline now a wasteland of floating debris. He had watched them all die. MJ, Ned, Happy. Every single person he had ever cared about wiped from existence. His hands trembled. He wasn't even crying anymore, because there was no one left to cry for. Strange, barely holding himself together, appeared beside him one last time. His body was fading, phasing in and out, his existence barely holding. Peter, we have to... Then he was gone. Doctor Strange, the last of Earth 616's protectors, was erased. Peter was alone, completely, utterly, alone, and still, he did not move. There was nowhere left to go. The sky cracked open one final time, and then darkness. The world was gone. Peter 1 stood on a floating ruin, the only remaining fragment of his universe. The sky was black, no sun, no moon, no stars, just an endless void. His breath was shallow, his fingers twitched. He took a slow step forward, then another. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know why he was even still alive. The silence around him was deafening. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, the last man alive. Then a voice. Far in the distance, beyond the fabric of reality, a figure observed, a towering cosmic being with piercing glowing eyes. The Watcher. He had seen many tragedies. He had witnessed universes rise and fall. But this was something even he had never seen before. For the first time in his existence, He did not know what to say. And so, he simply watched, as the last Spider-Man stood alone in a universe that no longer existed. Silence. Not the kind that came after a battle, nor the fleeting quiet before something terrible happened. This was the silence of nothingness. No wind, no stars, no sky, just darkness stretching endlessly. Peter 1 stood on a single fragment of land, the last floating ruin of his Earth. It had once been a city block, somewhere in New York, but now unrecognizable. A jagged piece of concrete and twisted steel drifting in an infinite void. His mask was gone. His suit was torn beyond repair. Blood stained his hands, his own, Tobey's, Andrew's, Norman's. He took a breath. It barely felt real. Every step he took echoed against the nothingness. A sound with no source, no space, no life. How long had he been here? Minutes, hours, days. Time had no meaning in a place where time no longer existed. He was alone. Utterly, incomprehensibly alone. And yet, he was still alive. Peter 1 knelt down, his fingers tracing the cracked pavement beneath him. His mind was fractured, memories playing like a broken reel. He saw flashes, MJ's smile, Ned's laugh, Aunt May's hand on his shoulder. Then, Tobey's face, eyes wide with shock as the glider pierced his chest. Andrew's final scream before Norman's blade cut through him. Doctor Strange desperate, trying to hold together the fabric of reality, only to be consumed by the incursion. It was all his fault. He had failed them, all of them. His fingers curled into fists, nails digging into his palms. He wished he could cry, but there was nothing left inside him. He had lost his friends, his family, his world. And still, he remained. A cruel joke played by the universe. Or maybe a punishment. From the distance, he watched. A being who had seen countless realities rise and fall, who had sworn never to interfere. A silent observer of the infinite. The Watcher. His enormous celestial form hovered just beyond the veil of existence. His glowing eyes locked onto the last remnant of Earth 616. He had never witnessed something like this before. An entire reality erased. A man left utterly alone. Not by fate, but by his own choices. For a moment he hesitated. He had broken his oath once before, interfered when the multiverse was on the brink of annihilation. But this was different. This was one man. One broken soul standing in the ruins of what once was. Could he justify interfering? Could he justify doing nothing? For the first time in his eternal existence, the Watcher did not know the answer. So he simply watched. Peter 1 stood at the edge of the floating ruin. Below him was nothing. An endless abyss. A void without meaning. What was left for him? He had spent his entire life fighting to protect people, to keep them safe, but there was no one left to save. No one left to fight. No reason to keep going. His breath was steady as he stepped forward, his feet hovering over the edge. One more step, and it would finally be over. No pain, no suffering, no more Spider-Man. He closed his eyes, then a golden spark flickered in the darkness. A portal, and from it a figure stepped through. The man who emerged was unlike anyone Peter had ever seen. Clad in a sleek futuristic Spider-Man suit, deep blue with glowing red accents. His mask was angular, sharp, his emblem stretching across his chest in a menacing design. His presence was commanding, but his eyes, though hidden beneath the mask, held something Peter had not seen in what felt like an eternity. Understanding. Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099. He stared at Peter 1 for a long moment before speaking. "You're not supposed to be here." Peter didn't move, didn't respond, Miguel sighed, stepping forward, his voice calm but firm. Listen, kid, I know what you're feeling. I know what you think you deserve. Peter's gaze flickered to him, dull and lifeless. You don't know anything about me. Miguel exhaled, his expression unreadable. I know more than you think. He gestured toward the void surrounding them. Your world is gone. Your timeline is gone. But you're still here. He took another step forward. And I need to know why. Peter shook his head, his voice hollow. There's nothing left. Just let me go. Miguel's eyes narrowed. No. Peter clenched his fists. Why? Miguel hesitated. Then for the first time his voice softened. Because you're still Spider-Man. Peter froze. Miguel reached out his hand. Come with me. Peter looked at the hand, then at the abyss beneath him. Then, slowly, he reached forward and took it. The portal closed behind them, sealing away the last remnant of a lost universe. Peter 1 was gone. His Earth was gone. But he still remained, and his story was not over yet. In a vast futuristic base, surrounded by technology far beyond anything Peter had seen, he stood beside Miguel O'Hara. Screens flickered around them, displaying broken timelines, anomalies, and incursions still unfolding across the multiverse. Miguel turned to him. We have work to do. Peter said nothing at first. Then, slowly, he nodded. His world was gone. But maybe, just maybe, he could still make things right.
And that is going to be it for What If Tom Holland's Spider-Man killed Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home. What did you think of this particular episode, especially with the ending? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I don't think there really needs to be a part 2, but if that's something that you guys are interested in, I would highly recommend that you let me know in the comments down below, as it really does go a long way to see, like what people want, what people maybe don't want. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I would highly recommend that you guys check out the Patreon because it's starting at just $3 a month. We have a brand new newsletter tier as well as a couple other tiers. So if you actually want to work with me on the channel and you have a bunch of ideas that you want to get done, I would highly recommend that you check those tiers out because there is a pathway that we can do some of these requests a lot faster. Because, see, the problem with my situation is that when I'm getting thousands and thousands and thousands of comments just on YouTube alone, not even including X, not even including Instagram, and some of these other platforms like Reddit, Discord, all in between, like, I can't answer all of those calls, and it's really unfortunate because I wish I could. But in doing so, if you do this and you subscribe to some of those Patreon tiers, you're actually, going to be able to kind of get that video out as soon as possible because we're going to be working together on it. And it's a lot of behind the scenes. You're going to see firsthand, like, what happens. But again, that's just an option. Your support really matters, even if you're a free member or just a subscriber or just a viewer. Your support goes a long way, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you guys so much for watching these videos, tuning in, commenting, everything, just engaging with the videos. It really means a lot to me. But that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and have a wonderful day. Peace out.